He's more fun than you'll ever be. And I deserve this trip. Those were the words that shattered 14 years of marriage in less than 10 seconds. My name is Daniel Carter, and I'm a 46-year-old marketing consultant from San Diego. I'd spent the last 3 months planning the most thoughtful anniversary trip I could imagine. 7 days across 5 European countries, built around every little thing my wife had ever said she wanted to see. The Louvre at sunrise, dinner on the Seine, a vineyard in Tuscany. All of it. That morning I stood in our driveway holding our car keys, expecting to load her bags and head to the airport. Instead, I found Monica standing beside Tyler, her personal trainer, 6'2" sun-kissed, and wearing designer sunglasses like he was headed to a fashion shoot. "I'm still going," Monica said, adjusting her purse strap. "But not with you." She wasn't carrying a suitcase. I thought maybe she'd forgotten something. But no, she'd replaced me. Just like that. 14 years. I'd never missed an anniversary, never forgotten a birthday, paid for her training sessions. Ironically, with the man now replacing me, I handed her the silk envelope with our itinerary. "Flight leaves in 2 hours," I said. She took it without even looking at me. Tyler had already bought his ticket. Same flight, same destination, same betrayal. But what neither of them knew, I had one final detail in place they hadn't planned for. Monica thought she'd stolen the trip of a lifetime. But the truth, she had no idea who she was dealing with. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror and watched Monica and Tyler walking toward the Uber, the one I had called. Tyler's arm draped casually around her waist, his posture so smug it could have been carved in marble. I guess he thought he'd won something. But Tyler hadn't won the trip. He'd just bought himself a very public lesson. You see, I hadn't booked this anniversary getaway like a typical husband scrambling to impress his wife. I'd arranged it like a project proposal. Through my company, Zentravision Consulting. Every hotel reservation, every 5-star restaurant, every private vineyard tour, all of it was billed through my business accounts, under my name, tied to my identification, and protected by multi-step authentication linked only to my phone. Why? Because I've worked too hard for too long to leave anything to chance. When I got to the office, I sat at my desk and pulled up the master itinerary. From Paris to Florence, each part of the trip was under my control. Photo ID required to check into the hotel in Paris. Restaurant confirmation sent to my email address only. Tour guides with my number as their sole contact. Tyler and Monica might have had the flight, but that was all they had. And they were about to find out how little that got them. I called Continental Airlines. "Hi, this is Daniel Carter. I need to update my travel plans for Flight 442 to Paris." Within 20 minutes, I'd moved my seat to a later flight on a different airline. Same day, same city, but far enough apart to avoid any awkward airport run-ins. My name was still on every major part of the trip, but now I wouldn't even have to witness the fallout in person. Then I called my assistant. "Hi Jessica, I need you to book a companion ticket for me. Lufthansa Flight 8092 to Rome. Tonight." "Of course, Mr. Carter," she said. "Should I ask who the second passenger is?" I hesitated. Then it hit me. Clara Wells, my sister. Clara had been by my side since the beginning, supportive, blunt, and fiercely loyal. She'd been telling me for years Monica didn't value me. She had divorced her own cheating husband 5 years earlier and rebuilt her life brick by brick. It was time she saw Italy too. We landed in Rome 8 hours later. While we were sipping Chianti and watching the sun melt over the rooftops, my phone rang. "Monica." I let it buzz. Twice. Then I picked up. "Daniel," she hissed, panic dripping from every syllable. "There's been a problem with the hotel. They won't check us in." "Oh," I said, feigning concern. "Did you show them the confirmation email?" "Of course I did." They said it doesn't matter. "The reservation is under your name and without you there. They can't verify it. They said it's company policy. Fraud prevention. Sounds like they run a tight ship. We're standing in the lobby like criminals, Daniel. This is humiliating." "Where's Tyler?" "Trying to find another room. But everything's booked. It's tourist season? And the credit card you gave me? It's been declined at every place we've tried." I leaned back and took another sip of wine. Clara raised her glass with a smirk. "Oh," I said casually. "Yeah, I suspended that card this morning. Company precaution. You understand." Monica's voice lowered to something softer, more desperate. The same tone she used every time she needed me to fix something. "Daniel, this is crazy. We can work this out when you get home." But right now, we need help. Please, I'm asking you. 14 years of marriage had trained me to respond to that voice like a soldier snapping to command. But sitting on that terrace in Italy, with the scent of basil in the air and my sister grinning like she just won the lottery, I felt nothing. Monica, I said evenly, 6 hours ago, you told me I was too boring for this trip. You chose another man. You said he appreciated you more. I didn't mean. You meant every word. Now enjoy Paris with him. You earned it. Then I hung up. The phone buzzed again. This isn't over. I deleted it. Clara leaned in and clinked her glass to mine. To better choices, she said. And for the first time in years, I smiled, really smiled, without having to fake it. That night in Florence, as Clara and I walked the quiet cobblestone streets near the Ponte Vecchio, I started thinking about just how far back this unraveling had started. Maybe it wasn't sudden. Maybe I'd known, not consciously, but somewhere deep in my bones, that Monica had been drifting long before the trainer ever entered the picture. It was like realizing a storm was coming only after you noticed the windows had already been shut and the dog was hiding under the bed. Looking back, the clues were everywhere, but I hadn't wanted to see them. It began small. A canceled dinner here, a late gym session there. She started locking her phone, something she'd never done in 14 years of marriage. When I asked, she rolled her eyes and said, "Everyone does that now, Daniel. It's just privacy." Then came the shift in tone. I could ask how her day went and be met with a cold "Fine." The woman who used to ramble about everything from what she saw at the grocery store to her client's messy divorce now barely looked up from her screen. She stopped laughing at my jokes, stopped kissing me goodnight, stopped looking me in the eyes. Monica didn't just fall out of love. She drifted away like a tide pulling further from shore every day, and I stood there, knee-deep, pretending the water wasn't rising. But even denial has its limits. I remember one particular night. This was maybe 5 months before the anniversary trip. She had come home late from a group fitness event and tossed her gym bag into the laundry like it was on fire. Something clanked inside it. Later, while doing the wash, I opened the bag. There were 2 hotel keycards still active. She never mentioned them. I sat there on the edge of our bed, holding them like evidence I didn't want to process. But I didn't ask. I just tucked them away in the top drawer of my nightstand and told myself there was probably a good explanation. That's what loving someone for over a decade does to your logic. You stop seeking truth. You start building excuses. In the months leading up to the trip, I caught her texting more often, smiling at her phone, switching screens when I walked into the room. I noticed new lingerie receipts on the credit card, items she never wore around me. There was a candle she said she got from a client, but I'd seen the same one on the hotel website near her gym. I even caught a glimpse of Alex's name flash across her smartwatch one evening while she was doing dishes. Again, I said nothing. But here's the thing. I wasn't being weak. I was preparing, quietly, methodically, like a man who realized the walls were cracking and decided to build an exit without announcing it. That's when I started shifting our finances. I consolidated accounts, replaced joint cards with personal ones, stopped auto-depositing my bonus checks, updated passwords, redirected travel points to my business portal, and most importantly, I began building a digital paper trail. If I was going to be blindsided, it would not be on her terms. Back on that terrace in Florence, as Clara and I shared a bottle of wine, and she regaled a story about slipping on marble steps in Venice during her backpacking days, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not triumph, not revenge, but clarity. I hadn't planned for Monica to betray me, but in many ways I had prepared for it anyway. My instincts, dulled by routine and loyalty, had still picked up the signals. Somewhere inside, I'd already started grieving the version of our marriage I thought we had. And when she handed me that betrayal in the driveway, packaged so boldly, so publicly, I didn't need to fight. Because I'd already let her go. That night, I looked at Clara across the table. "You ever think," I asked, "that some people don't cheat to be happy, they cheat because they're too cowardly to fix what's broken, or walk away honestly?" Clara nodded. "Some people don't want a new life, Daniel. They just want attention without accountability." I raised my glass. "To clean exits?" I said. "To not looking back," she replied. We toasted. And somewhere across Europe, I imagined Monica and Tyler, standing on a Parisian curb with no hotel, no credit, no backup plan. And suddenly, I didn't feel betrayed anymore. I felt free. The morning after our Florence dinner, I sat by the hotel window, sipping coffee as the sunlight cut through the Roman rooftops. I wasn't just here to sightsee. I was here to start clean. By the time Monica and Tyler had likely found a budget motel in Paris, I had already called my attorney, Grant Matheson, a former Marine-turned-family law expert in San Diego who specialized in quiet strategic exits. We'd worked together once before on a business contract dispute, and I remembered his parting advice: always keep receipts. No one fights fair when the house is on fire. I had more than receipts. I had statements, transactions, and a timeline. Over the past 6 months, Monica had used our joint accounts to fund her affair. Private training sessions billed twice a week, restaurant tabs for 2 under her name, hotel charges tagged to, wellness retreats. In total, she'd spent just over $47,000, including several $1,000s on upgrades to our anniversary trip, which I now knew had never been meant for us. Grant didn't flinch. "We'll file first," he said. "California's a no-fault state, but financial misconduct still matters when dividing property. She used marital funds for personal betrayal. We make that clear?" 2 days later, while Monica was still finding herself in Paris, she was served divorce papers at the address I'd left for her emergency contact. She never saw it coming. For someone who had planned to blindside me, she hadn't even considered I might move first. And I didn't stop there. I compiled every transaction tied to Alec: the gym payments, the hotel charges, the lingerie from luxury boutiques I knew she never wore around me. I traced everything and created a forensic expense report, complete with dates, vendors, and summaries. Clara helped me bind it into a neat little packet which I titled, "When Loyalty Pays the Bill." Grant laughed when he saw it. "You'd make a decent paralegal? Not bad for a marketing guy?" I shrugged. By the time Monica returned to San Diego, sunburned and silent, she was stepping into a courtroom where I had already told the story, with facts, not fury. She tried to argue that our marriage had broken down long ago, that we had grown apart, and that she had every right to explore her happiness. The judge nodded politely. Then Grant handed over the expense packet. "Your Honor," he said, "we're not contesting her right to leave the marriage. We're contesting her use of joint assets to bankroll infidelity, including a luxury vacation originally presented to our client as an anniversary gift." Monica's face went pale as the judge flipped through the documents. The final straw: a shared photo of her and Alec on the balcony of a Parisian hotel suite. Posted to Alec's Instagram under the caption, "Living our truth both." The same suit I had booked 6 weeks prior. The court didn't need more. Monica walked away with minimal alimony, forfeited her claim to the house, and lost access to my retirement fund. The judge ruled that her financial behavior constituted a breach of fiduciary duty in the marriage. Alec, predictably, had already ghosted her before the ink on the petition dried. She tried to reach out once, an email titled, "We Were Both Wrong." I didn't open it. I archived it. Back in Florence, I stood on the steps of the Uffizi Gallery, watching tourists bustle past. Clara was inside admiring Botticelli. I stayed outside, just breathing. I had always thought divorce would come with fireworks, shouting, lawyers storming out of conference rooms, slammed doors. But this was a quiet kind of closure. Not dramatic, just honest. A clean break. And as I looked out across the Arno River, I realized something. I had planned a trip for 2. But what I found, instead, was a road back to myself. Weeks passed, then months. Monica faded into the rearview like a bad radio station you stop hearing the further you drive. I never responded to her email. Never returned the voicemail she left on my birthday. Not out of spite, but because I didn't owe her my attention anymore. Closure for me wasn't about dramatic confrontations. It was about stillness, about choosing peace every time her memory tried to creep back in. By the end of fall, I had made a decision I never thought I would. I called Clara, who had since returned to San Diego, and said 4 words I hadn't dared say aloud yet. "I'm staying in Florence." The apartment was small, tucked behind a quiet cafe near Piazza Santo Spirito. Nothing flashy. Just 2 bedrooms, hand-cut tile, a wrought iron balcony, and a creaky old espresso machine that sputtered like an old man clearing his throat. It was perfect. The kind of place where mornings felt sacred and time slowed to something almost sacred. I didn't buy it as an escape. I bought it as a commitment. To myself. To starting over without bitterness. And to never letting someone else's betrayal define the rest of my life. From that little corner of Florence, I restarted Zentravision Consulting on my terms. With a laptop, a Wi-Fi signal, and a view of terracotta rooftops, I restructured my services to serve American clients remotely. Turns out you don't need a high-rise office to deliver high-value strategy. In fact, clients liked it better. You sound less stressed. Daniel, one of them said on a Zoom call. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I was. And I would. Every morning I walked the Arno, cappuccino in hand, while the city yawned awake. Every afternoon, I worked with clarity I hadn't felt in years. No background noise, no tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Just me doing what I was good at, without anyone tearing me down for not being fun enough or spontaneous enough. Florence somehow gave me back pieces of myself I didn't even realize Monica had slowly chipped away. I started sketching again, something I hadn't done since college. Bought a used camera from a local shop and started capturing morning light filtering through cathedrals. And for the first time in over a decade, I didn't feel lonely when I came home to silence. I felt centered, grounded, like the version of me I'd been trying to return to had simply been waiting for me to stop chasing validation and just sit still. Occasionally, I'd see couples walking hand in hand through the piazza and feel a pang of nostalgia, not longing. I wasn't afraid of love. I just no longer believed in building it on a foundation of sacrificing who you are to keep someone else comfortable. If love ever found me again, it would have to meet me where I stood, not pull me into someone else's shadow. A few months later, Clara came to visit. She stepped onto my balcony with a glass of Chianti, looked out over the city, and said, "You look lighter, Daniel." Like a weight came off your chest. I smiled and replied, "Because it did. We toasted to freedom, to survival, to knowing when to walk away before you lose yourself trying to fix someone who never asked to be saved." Monica eventually remarried, I heard, to a man she met at some wellness retreat. I wished her no ill will, but I didn't miss her. That version of my life felt like another lifetime. Another man's story, one I'd read and put down. What I had now wasn't flashy or loud. It wasn't revenge or vindication. It was better. It was quiet mornings, a reclaimed self-worth, and the knowledge that sometimes the best chapter of your life begins when someone else thinks they've ended it for you. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real victory. One crisp February morning, just as the bells of Santo Spirito began their soft tolling, I received an unexpected email. The sender's name hit me like a ghost from a past life, Monica Reynolds. The subject line was just one word: closure. I stared at it for a full minute, my coffee going cold in my hands. For a brief second, I wondered if it might be an apology, a final note to say she understood what she'd done. But as I opened it, any hope of grace quickly dissolved. The message was long, too long, and filled with half-excuses dressed up as reflection. She spoke about regret, about confusion, about how our marriage had lost its spark, and how Tyler hadn't turned out to be what she expected. She wrote that she had been thinking a lot about our trip, the way I had planned it with so much care, and how she wished she had appreciated it more. She ended the message with, "Maybe one day we can talk, just as friends, and remember the good years. I still think about Italy sometimes." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. That door wasn't just closed. It had been sealed, bricked over, and grown over with ivy. I had rebuilt too much of myself to ever let her back in, even through memory. What struck me most was that even now, even in her attempt at reconciliation, Monica still didn't understand what she'd really done. It wasn't just the affair. It was the dismissal of everything we had built, the disregard for loyalty, and the assumption that I would always be waiting, just in case she changed her mind. But I wasn't. I had moved on, not out of spite, but out of necessity. There's only so long a man can stand in the rain before he realizes he's soaked and chooses to come in. Spring arrived early in Florence that year. I spent most mornings on the balcony, watching the city slowly stretch awake. My business had grown, not wildly, but steadily, with enough clients to keep me challenged and fulfilled. Some of them knew my story in bits and pieces. One, a widower in New Jersey, once told me during a strategy session, "You sound like a man who's learned how to let go without bitterness." That's rare. I thanked him and said, "Takes a few storms to learn which anchors are worth keeping." One evening, I attended a small dinner hosted by a local entrepreneur I'd collaborated with. The table was filled with people from everywhere: Amsterdam, Boston, Lisbon. I found myself seated beside a woman named Evelyn. a retired professor from Chicago who had recently moved to Florence to write a book on classical literature. We talked about everything from Dante to jazz records, and at one point, she looked at me and said, "You don't seem like a man running from anything. You seem like someone who finally stopped." And she was right. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. Not validation, not revenge, not even healing. Because I had already healed. In my own time, on my own terms. Monica's betrayal no longer occupied space in my life. It was just a lesson now. A story I had lived through, learned from, and left behind. I never told Evelyn the full story. Maybe one day I will, but for now, I simply live forward. No longer defined by the woman who left, but by the man who stayed. Stayed long enough to rediscover who he was when no one was watching. And that, I realized, was the greatest piece of all. Looking back, I used to think the worst thing that could happen was being betrayed by someone you trusted. But now I know. The real tragedy would have been betraying myself by staying in something that had already died. Sometimes, the people we love teach us the hardest lessons, that not everyone is meant to grow with us. And that letting go is not weakness, it's wisdom. What I lost in that marriage I gained tenfold in clarity, in self-respect, in the quiet joy of mornings that don't start with tension, in conversations that don't feel like walking on glass. Life doesn't always give us clean endings, but we can still choose to start again with cleaner hearts. So if you've ever been left behind, replaced, or made to feel like you weren't enough, hear this: you are more than what they couldn't see. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is no longer proving your worth to someone who never valued it to begin with. Has life ever pushed you to rebuild from the ground up? Share your story in the comments. I read them all. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more true life tales of resilience, quiet revenge, and starting over stronger. Because sometimes the best comeback is simply becoming who you were meant to be all along.